All right, well, welcome to the Window into Paris COP21 webcast with Nicole Anderson live from Paris. My name is Megan, and I am the programs coordinator at Climate Generation, A Will Steer Legacy. And we are a nonprofit in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we educate and empower people to engage in solutions to climate change. So we recognize that educators are critical messengers of climate and energy literacy for hundreds of students every year, just like yourselves over there in St. Paul. And we are leading a group of 10 education ambassadors in our Window into Paris program. And they are currently at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change 21st Conference of the Parties. So for short, that's COP21. In Paris, France this week. So these teachers are engaging in the international climate negotiations as both learners and educators back to their classrooms and their communities. They represent diverse subject areas, grade levels, and educational settings around the entire country. So this year's negotiations, they have the goal of achieving a legally binding and universal agreement on climate with the aim of keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So that is what all the negotiations are trying to achieve these 2 weeks. And today we have Madame Anderson with us, who is going to give us an inside look at what she's been up to in Paris at COP21. And we also have her class in St. Paul, Minnesota, with us as well. So we'll just give a little rundown and have time at the end for Q&A from the students. So I will hand it over to Madame Anderson.
Bonjour, Ramsey. This is really fun to get to connect with you in this way. It's a little bit strange because you can see me and I can't see you. So I would like to hear from you, and I'd like to give a little shout out and ask, is Mr. Gilmer's current events class there? Let me hear ya.
Yeah!
Ooh, all right. And I'd like to know if my period 2A class is there.
Yeah!
Woo-hoo, all right, team. And I would like to know if students from my period 2B class are there. All right, yes, we have some. So it's really great to talk to you, and I have to start off with a few thank yous because I need to say a big thank you or merci to Mr. Gilmer to be on the other end of this call and to be willing to share with the students on that end. I want to say thank you too to Climate Generation and Megan and Jenna and Kristen and all the people that are working hard to make this happen. And I actually want to say as well, thank you to our principal, Ms. Vipar, for letting me get the time off to come here to Paris. It's an amazing, amazing experience. So I thought that you might want to see a little bit of what I have been up to with some pictures, and then I can show pictures and talk about what I've been doing.
Can I ask a question? No, not yet.
We're going to have questions at the end, I believe.
Choose full screen. Yep. Share. Then go back up to your tab that's open. And then do present. Blue button. Yeah, there you go. Yep.
All right. So as Megan introduced, this is COP21 in Paris. And as you see on the screen, it says, pour un accord universel sur le climat. And really what's happening here is representatives from 193 countries coming together, and they want to make, accord means an agreement, they want to make a universal agreement about climate. So that's universal to all countries in our world, and universal in that everyone's going to abide by that. Okay.
You click with your arrows.
I did. So I don't know what's happening with my slides, but
It's loading. Did you have a movie in here or something?
no.
Oh, it's just slow.
So as part of the COP21,
Do it this
the
way. They
conference,
can see that.
okay, we're going to do it this way.
Yep.
We were there. So we met on Sunday with the 10 teachers, and this was our first meeting in this picture here at our hostel called the Generator Hostel. And actually one of the strongest experiences I've had so far happened on that very first day that we were here. And in this picture you see our group with Ellen Anderson, who's a former state senator, and one of our state representatives as well, who joined us and talked to us about some of the work they've been doing on climate change in Minnesota. So there are lots of Minnesotans here. There are lots of Americans here. There are lots of people from all over the world that we just keep bumping into all over Paris. So that's our group, and this is in the metro. As we travel around Paris, we're taking the metro everywhere. And behind me in this picture here, you see kind of an ad for COP21, and it says 7 million inhabitants, I think 700 million inhabitants, one planet. So on that very first day, we took the metro to UNESCO. And this is kind of what the inside of UNESCO looks like, their big auditorium. And we were seated in these seats that are saved for the delegates of all over the world. What we saw was a presentation called Storytelling with Robert Redford. And he had some guests that I want to tell you about. And that was the event. But it was just such a strong experience to go to UNESCO and know that they have representatives from all over the world working on various issues. UNESCO is United Nations Committee for Education, Science, Cultural organization. And this is a person that I know in that organization. I met him at French camp, and so he was able to tell us about this event. And then this person up here is one of the speakers that you'll hear about in a minute. So at this event called UNESCO Storytelling with Robert Redford, Robert Redford is a big environmentalist, and he came and was a part of this conference. And then we also had a speaker from Papua New Guinea. This is a traditional leader from Papua New Guinea. And we also had someone from Indonesia and the Marshall Islands. And they each told their story of how climate change is affecting them right now. As I've been working with my class about climate change, we've been talking about, oh, this will happen in the future. And yet this was extremely moving for me to hear people's real stories about how they are affected now. Climate changes now. And this traditional leader was telling us about his forests being cut down, and the Marshall Islands have lots of problems related to hurricanes and cyclones and rising sea levels and the water table. And another speaker was Kathy Jetnil-Kidger, and she's from the Marshall Islands, and she's actually a poet, and she does spoken word. And if you happen to see my blogs, her poem was posted on the blog. But this event was amazing to me because it was the very first day of being here, and it really showed me that other places in the world besides where we live, people are really dealing with climate change right now on a daily level. To have water to drink, the water table is changing. To have food on their table, there are farmers in Bangladesh who can't grow their food because everything has become salty from the sea. So that was a really, really powerful experience. And that's one place in Paris where there are events and workshops, and really there's lots of places all over Paris with workshops and people gathering together about climate change. So the other place that is the big conference place is called Le Bourget, and you see outside, this is where you walk in, and there's a couple different places here at Le Bourget. There's the blue zone, which is just for negotiators and observers, and then there's the green zone, which is the public zone, where lots of organizations all over the world have booths. There are lots of youth groups that are actually represented here. This was a group that was demonstrating or having an action one day about rich countries do your fair share. So in class, when we learned about developed countries and developing A and developing B, really we realized that some of the less developed countries, like these people came from Papua New Guinea, really are facing climate change now. And it's kind of our duty from the richer countries to do our fair share too. So these are scenes of the green zone in Le Bourget, where I've been spending the last few days going to workshops and learning lots of things. And these are youth from Sierra Student Coalition. I am encountering students. Some high school students are here, and some college students are here. And also, there's a lot of people coming from far away. These are Inuit students to share their culture, but also to tell how climate change is affecting them, and how this is a really important meeting that will hopefully put us on the right track. Here's another. We're seeing people all the time in the conference hall that are dressed from their native lands. And actually we're seeing people all the time as well out and about in Paris from their native lands. Just the other day in a park, I ran across someone from El Salvador who was sent here by a group called Friends of the Earth, and many organizations are really working hard to bring people to have their voices heard, and that's what we're hoping will happen with this conference. Here we go. So that was in the conference area, and this says 2 degrees is already too much. And so the negotiations have been taking place. We're getting close to the end of 2 weeks, and the representatives from all the countries are discussing various parts of the draft document. Right now they're working on a draft of a piece of paper that they can all agree on all the pieces of it. Now this is actually a really big task with 193 countries with varying viewpoints on how does that fit with our economy, what are our big goals, how does this really fit into our picture. So in the negotiations, you might know that we're aiming for 2 degrees Celsius, getting back down to 2 degrees Celsius of change. And actually this came into play this week. Some people were actually aiming for 1.5 because the speaker from the Marshall Islands on Sunday said that 2 degrees really, her island is still flooded. So we needed to aim lower. So various voices are being heard. So right now there's a draft document with brackets or parentheses on the pieces that the parties all have to agree upon. And they're using this word ambitious because they want to have an agreement that will challenge everyone to really bring down their emissions. So in the language of the draft, this word ambitious really means like, how serious are we about this? Are we going to have an accord that's relatively easy for people to get to but doesn't really progress us very far? Or are we going to have an ambitious accord? And then another piece that's being discussed is when and how often are the check-in points. So even after the agreement is made, hopefully in the next 2 days, who's going to check up on the countries doing what they said they would do, and how often is that going to happen? Next here on my list is Indigenous Peoples, because as I showed you some of these pictures of people all over the world who are affected by climate change, many of them are Indigenous peoples, and part of the agreement is how they fit into the picture. They are somewhat known as vulnerable countries or vulnerable peoples because they are hit first with climate change, the effects of climate change. And then the last one is on this list to let you know about is INDCs. Each country wrote its INDC before they came here to the conference. These are the national contributions, so that is what every country said they would do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and therefore lower the global warming temperature. And so they're calling this conference a bit of a bottom-up conference because each country has come with a piece of paper saying, this is what we can do, and then they're challenged, I think, to do better, but there's no one at the top saying every country must accomplish this percentage or that percentage. It's starting off with what does each country bring to the table as something that they can do. So another really strong event that happened was yesterday, and here's our group of educators, and we were able to discuss and talk with John Holdren, who is the senior advisor to President Barack Obama on science and technology issues. And this was a really strong moment because you see in the hands of John Holdren and Becky, you see, and right here, Roy has some postcards from his students. So those of you who made posters that were your opinion, your views, your voice about climate change, those posters ended up right here in this book. And we presented it to President Obama's right-hand man on science and technology issues. So we had a great discussion, and we're quite confident that all that student work, student voice, is really going to arrive in the hands of President Obama. It kind of makes me get chills just thinking about that. So that was a little bit about the conference. I also wanted to give you just a quick window into the world here in Paris, because some of you are French students, and window into my world here in Paris is taking the metro every day. This is like the subway. Sometimes it's underground, sometimes it's above ground. We walk on the streets of Paris to get places, and we walk by cafes with a terrace. I haven't managed every morning, but every morning I wanted to go to the boulangerie or pâtisserie to get my croissant. Notice that's not a croissant like you might hear other people say. So although we haven't had a lot of time, we've been taking a little bit advantage of life here in Paris. Here's a, let's see if I can get to it. Okay, so in the metro, just like any other big city, There's tons of people that all look different, and many of them are French people from France, and some of them are people coming for COP. So we did manage to go out to dinner one night on Montmartre. This is a big church on a hill overlooking Paris. And of course, I needed to order a crepe. I was telling my French students about the street corner stands to get a crepe. And again, that's not a crepe, but a crepe. And these are just scenes from Paris. Here's Santa Claus. They have a big Christmas market out on the Champs-Élysées, the main street right by the Arc de Triomphe. And these are actually some pieces of glacier that have traveled from Greenland to be here for an artwork here in Paris. So here I am right here. This is the Champs-Élysées, really famous big street. And way down at the end, you see the Arc de Triomphe, another famous monument. This is one of the places that has another kind of exposition on climate change. This was where different big companies were having a big conference and an exposition about what they're doing for climate change. This is Notre Dame Cathedral. If you ever heard of Quasimodo, that's where he lived. And that's the Seine River and, of course, the Eiffel Tower. So one thing that I did want to fill you in a little bit on is, I'm sure you've all heard about the terrorist attacks a few weeks ago here in Paris. And of course, as a French teacher, I'm really connected to people here in Paris, and that was very tragic news that we heard. So one of the things that I did when I got here was I wanted to visit the places where the attacks happened to honor those people who died. And it was pretty important to me to go around to some of those places. And so I took a few pictures. This is just a regular old cafe terrace, but this is the sign I found by a cafe where some of those attacks happened. And it says, "Je suis en terrasse." So it means I am on the terrace. So typically, you walk down a block here in Paris and you'll walk by 3 or 4 of these terrace cafes. And some of the attacks kind of happened, it could have been anywhere, and terrorists came and started shooting at people who were on the terrace. So Parisians with whom I've talked kind of made a point after to not be afraid of going back to the terraces. It's kind of like getting on a horse after you've been thrown. One of my friends here said, you know, the first time I went to a sidewalk cafe, after that was kind of hard. It was very emotional. But I've been really inspired by people here in Paris who say, yes, that happened, but we're going to keep being who we are, and we're going to keep doing the things we love to do. And so this is kind of a way of saying, I'm going to go on terraces, and I'm not going to be afraid by what happened. So that's been really inspiring to see how people have reacted, and you know, different French people react in different ways. But many of the people I've talked to who are my friends have just been very inspirational, really. These 2 pictures are places where people have brought flowers and memorials to those who were killed. And there are lots of those places in Paris right now. And some of them, this one down here, you can't really see, just have piles and piles and piles of memorials. But I'll just close my comments with this last picture here that really said something to me. It says, Notre amour plus fort que votre haine. Our love is stronger than your hate. Even though it's not a very happy thing to talk about, I think it's part of what's happening here in Paris, and I wanted to share that with you. So that's the end of my pictures. That's the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you. If the class of St. Paul has questions, we can take those now.
Questions from you guys?
I want to know what time it is over there.
Oh, yes. It is 5 to 4.
In the afternoon. Anything else? Yep.
What are U.S.'s views on global warming at this conference?
What are U.S. views on global warming at the conference?
Well, at one point in the conference, there were some people who weren't very happy with us. We were kind of slow to agree with people. I think yesterday, John Kerry came out pretty strong about let's get this work done and let's come away with an agreement. The political situation is kind of hard because the American negotiators have to kind of stay in a certain political realm because they know that if something has to go to Congress, that it may not be agreed with in Congress. So they really have to stay in a certain political arena. And we're not always the good guys.
Other questions? What has been your favorite part of the conference so far, or of your experience?
Favorite part is really just being a part of everything that's happening. It still kind of blows my mind that you know, through this webcast, we're actually bridging two worlds, and our worlds that we're bridging are pretty close. But my favorite part has been meeting people from all over the world who bring a different perspective on this.
Questions? One student is wondering if you're going to bring something back for her.
I think I know who that is. I won't name any names, but I do have a very small edible item for all of my students.
Yay!
Saskia, what's your question on global warming? Think about it. Give us a couple seconds. We'll think of some questions real quick. Talk in turn, 30 seconds to come up with some questions. Go ahead.
Why is global warming now?
They're chatting amongst themselves.
No problem.
So what's your question about France? What's your question about global warming? Thank you. Hold up. Saskia, what's your question? Was what? I don't guess. Albert.
Ooh, that's good. When will the decision with the agreement go into effect?
It will go into effect in 2020 is when all the stuff's going to start. The decision, we're hoping in the next 2 days that the draft of the document will actually be agreed upon and that we'll have something to read fresh, hot off the presses.
My students are looking surprised. Why so long?
Why so long to put things into effect?
Yep.
Well, if you were with all the climate activists here, we would say the same thing. Why so long? I guess one thing that I've learned being here is that there are so many big, huge infrastructure pieces that go along with climate change that probably as kind of ordinary citizens, they're not really very obvious to us, to me. So one piece is, you know, say this draft comes into being and it's going to regulate how much emissions we put into the air. That's kind of like a trickle-down thing that has to reach the very bottom level of, you know, Xcel Energy. If some of these agreements are going to be saying how much emissions we can put into the air, it has to have time to trickle down to the right people, and some people also have to be making real change to make it happen. So if I gave my example of Xcel Energy, and they have to have a certain percentage of renewable energy by XYZ year, that means that they have to change the way they're doing business. And so things like that, unfortunately, do take years.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have one more question. I think we have time for one more.
Anyone else have a question? Silence.
Great. Well, thank you so much, the class in St. Paul, and for Madame Anderson for sharing all the stuff she's been doing in Paris.
All right, round of applause for the students.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today, and have a good rest of your trip.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Thank you. Have a great day.